Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 news. Red Bull are facing heavy criticism after their confirmation that Sergio Perez will stay as Max Verstappen's teammate for the second half of the season. Many in the community are suggesting, have Red Bull effectively given up on the Constructors Championship this year? How seriously can we actually take Red Bull as an organisation right now, given this latest decision, especially after what Kvyat, Gasly and Albon did with respect to Perez in that seat over the last several seasons? Lots of criticism as well, even from Williams team principal James Vowles, onto what they should have done instead. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty going on. First of all, the following. The Dutch Grand Prix is happening after the summer break in Zandvoort, and it is likely to return after 2025. The latest rumour, however, is that it will alternate with Spa. Now, this, if it happens, will be a real, kick to the guts if Spa is no longer on the calendar every single year. And yes, until this year, the last few years at Spa haven't exactly produced the greatest races. Phenomenal racetrack, the history, the track itself, spectacular in many ways. But to be fair, it's not produced the greatest Grand Prix. Even this year, it's not like there was crazy overtakes or anything really. It was just a good race because there were loads of drivers in the fight for the victory of the Grand Prix at the end of the day. But there have been rumours for some time, the upgrades around the track at Spa, the difficulty of accessibility of the, Spa-Francorchamps circuit, that maybe it may end up being a rotating track, which is not on the calendar every single year. So the rumour has it that this will be with Zandvoort, and they will effectively alternate the Netherlands or the Dutch Grand Prix with the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa. So rumours are emerging that, this is borderline a done deal, or at least the deal is potentially finalised, although there was then further discussion from Daniel Moxon here from the Mirror Sports, who says that, as far as he understands, no deal has been agreed. But it doesn't mean that it won't happen, it just means that they haven't definitively decided to go down that path yet. But it's definitely something which seems like a conversation being had. I think this would be a loss either way. I think Zandvoort's an okay track. I wouldn't, get rid of it for another street circuit, right, which is seemingly what we're right now doing in Formula 1, but I would definitely get rid of it in favour of Spa. Would I prefer a Spa Grand Prix every year or an alternation? I suppose with Verstappen and everything. It's a great atmosphere at Zandvoort, but also pretty good atmosphere at Spa as well. That's a debate for you guys to have in the comments section below. Now, a few things from Helmut Marko. This was a very interesting one that I think says quite a lot, and even I think the Perez decision says a lot on what that internal situation is when it comes to who actually holds the cards at Red Bull, right? Because we know that a few months ago the power struggle went down behind the scenes. Jos Verstappen, among others, trying to get Horner out of the team. That didn't work, and it seems like Horner now has full control over the outfit, and that remains the case. Marko seems to have less control as a result, and he said the other day that they had agreed with Max. They talked to Max and said, look, Verstappen, you are no longer going to be sim racing till 3 a.m. in the morning because it's affecting your performance on the Sunday. Max says, what are you talking about, guys? I know what I'm doing. I can win Grand Prix, I can win sim races, and whether you think Verstappen is correct or incorrect in saying that, Verstappen acts like, and in many ways probably does, effectively run this team, in the sense that they are unlikely to want to undermine what Verstappen likes, because if they do, he might just go and leave, potentially to Mercedes, because they are an increasingly attractive proposition, and, well, for very good reason, over the last couple of rounds. So the Dutchman was up to 3 a.m. on Sunday morning ahead of the Hungarian Grand Prix, and Marko said that effectively they talked to Max and said that that isn't going to happen anymore, certainly not that late. Verstappen then said, what do you mean? I do what I want. I don't tell the engineers what to do with their evenings. They're not going to tell me what to do with my evenings. And now Marko has said, well, we've agreed that in the future he will not drive well past midnight, even though he has a completely different rhythm of life. But still, you have to avoid things like this that are understandably attacked in public, he says. And then he goes on to say that it's not a ban, but it is a very strong recommendation, which I thought was pretty funny, to be honest. So Max basically said they can't tell me what to do, and Marko's now saying, well, we very strongly recommended to Max what he should be doing here, and Max just told them to F off, it seems, and is going to do exactly what he wants. So I think it's quite clear that the situation at Red Bull is far from sunshine and rainbows. It hasn't been for some time, but definitely after this whole saga. I wonder if the Perez being kept thing is also in part trying to keep Max happy, because Max said basically the car's the problem, it isn't on Perez. Perez, he's doing all right. It's more so, and the feeling is from Max that if you replace Perez with somebody else, they're not necessarily going to do a massively better job. And Max is probably quite happy with Perez in some ways because he can easily beat him every weekend. Whereas if you bring in somebody else, like let's say you brought in Sainz, is Max so happy about that? Probably not. So this is the situation that Christian Horner has to manage right now. And it's the situation as well that McLaren are trying to manage over at their team, because you've got Piastri, you've got Norris, both very competent drivers. And Piastri is looking increasingly good actually as the season goes on. Even Helmut Marko says it seems that Piastri is mentally the stronger one. And I think that I would generally agree with that assessment. I think that Lando is the stronger driver overall right now, and that may be the case for a little bit of time to come. Piastri is still pretty damn new to the sport, but mentally, you can definitely argue that Piastri keeps, his head in check more consistently than Lando does. Certainly over the last few rounds, that has felt like the case, and Lando has been outscored quite comprehensively by Piastri over the last few rounds. In fact, both Piastri and Hamilton have outscored Red Bull, and I believe outscored Ferrari over the last 4 or so races. They've scored 80 points each, those drivers. Verstappen and Perez have scored like 78 in the same time frame. Oscar has gradually closed the gap to Lando and is sometimes even faster, Marko says. So look, McLaren have some interesting decisions to make over the coming rounds, as do Red Bull, of course, especially if Perez's form doesn't improve after the summer break. Couple of quick things on Ferrari. After the summer break, Ferrari will confirm their new organizational chart, as they describe it. So they are effectively going to try and lock in a new technical director. Rumours, of course, as to what that might mean for Adrian Newey, whether that's going to be a thing or not. Then there's further developments, maybe for Singapore. The 4th power unit is going to come into the pool. So no penalty for the 4th one this year, but that will come in. A software update as well to potentially unlock more engine performance, kind of like what Mercedes did towards the latter half of last season. And then full focus on next year's FF25, the car that will be driven, of course, by Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. My big question is on that Ferrari SF25, will they actually decide to change the rear suspension? Because this year, every single team on the grid went towards a pushrod rear suspension that Red Bull have popularised with Adrian Newey in this cycle of regulations. Ferrari, and therefore Haas, were the only teams this year to not go down that route. Ferrari effectively saying the benefits of the pushrod are relatively minor, therefore we're not really going to bother. It's not going to make much difference. But maybe there's a feeling that they had the wrong call on that. I don't really know what's caused the downfall of Ferrari this season from where they were at the start of the year to where they are now, but certainly questions will be asked on that. But let's talk about Sergio Perez, because over the last few rounds, it's been an absolute disaster, and Red Bull's hold on the Constructors Championship is basically disappearing. Their advantage now is something like 40 points. McLaren have eaten into it substantially, and there is no doubt right now that McLaren are the favourites for this year's Constructors Championship. Indeed, the gap here is 42 points between the two teams with several rounds to go. It's not looking good for Red Bull's chances given their performances over the last few rounds. Sure, Verstappen was on pole before getting P11 after the penalty in Spa, and he was fastest in qualifying by quite some margin. But a couple of factors at play there: the wet conditions, the very high downforce setup Red Bull went for that definitely favoured Max in those conditions, and of course Perez ended up second on the grid in the end after just getting pipped by Charles Leclerc. So there was a few things at that, but in the actual race itself, was the Red Bull the fastest car? Didn't really seem like it. Sure, Max made good progress, but got stuck in a DRS train, and we've seen that before now with Max, whereas in the last couple of years, he would just be breezing past, no problem at all. So that's where McLaren lie. Mercedes have made big progress as well, but largely this is due to Sergio Perez, disastrously underperforming from where he was at the start of the season to where he is now. It's a big deal. But Perez said in Spa, look, I've had enough of this speculation. I'm definitely going to be driving after the summer break. What are you guys talking about, right? And then yesterday, the rumour had it, not even a rumour, right? This is confirmed. Red Bull had a meeting to describe what was going to happen next, and they decided that Perez will remain. Eric Van Haren says this is confirmed by the team. Chris Medland then says, yeah, this is a done deal as well. And relatively shortly afterwards, Red Bull officially confirmed it themselves that yes, Perez will be staying at Red Bull Racing for the end of the season, and technically he has a contract to take him, of course, through 25 and 26 as well. I don't think that's going to happen. I am surprised, though, that Red Bull didn't make the move now, because over the last few years, Red Bull have been indisputably the most ruthless team on the grid. Nick De Vries puts it in the wall one too many times. You're out of the car. Daniel Ricciardo's in. Danny Kvyat, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, all drivers that had their chances at Red Bull Racing didn't perform as they would have liked them to, kicked out of the car, some sort of replacement comes into play alongside Max Verstappen. But here we are with Sergio Perez underperforming arguably worse than any of those drivers ever did with respect to Max, and all of a sudden Perez keeps the seat. They have faith in Perez to rediscover the form. Like, what has happened to the Red Bull that I knew, right? This Red Bull that would be cutting drivers left, right and centre, that has not been the case for Sergio Perez. And what does he have on these guys? Like, what sort of blackmail does he have? I think there's a couple of explanations here. The feeling may be the car is in a position where any other driver would not do a massively better job that could realistically be attained by Red Bull as it presently stands. Still surprises me though, really, that Red Bull are at this point, because I can guarantee you, if Helmut Marko was the one making the decision, Perez would be gone. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Horner must have the cards in his hand over there at Red Bull now. Marko mustn't have much of a say. And Horner says, despite all speculation of recent times, we look forward to seeing him perform on circuits where he has done well before after the summer break. So what do we think about this decision by Red Bull? Will he turn his form around? Is it really down to the money, right? Because Perez brings in a lot of sponsors. The Mexican Grand Prix is coming up. You know, the US Grand Prix is Austin, and US Grand Prix in Austin's coming up. He has lots of support there as well. So many merchandise sales from, you know, the Hispanic community, shall we say, that supports Perez and Red Bull. And he obviously brings in big sponsor revenue as well. So to me, Red Bull are making a decision that what I've just mentioned matters more than the Constructors Championship, which is a pretty big claim to make, because the Constructors does mean a lot for these teams. But I guess either they feel like it doesn't mean enough compared to what Perez can bring, or they just don't think that it's going to matter who else they put in the car in terms of winning that Constructors Championship. Some of the fans will say, fine, who cares? Come second in the Constructors, come third in the Constructors, and get more wind tunnel testing for next season. And the fans will care about that. For the teams, though, they generally want the prize money, right? They want to be winning the championships, and right now it does look like Perez is going to cost Red Bull the championship. But they've decided that instead of getting rid of him, putting somebody new in the car, they will try and give Checo more of what he needs from the car instead. But, you know, the car is clearly not the car it was at the start of the season. Whether that's because there was some sort of illegal element to the car discovered and enforceably removed, we talked about that a few days ago, and I'm not going to lie, the way the season has gone makes me wonder what we might hear on that over the coming months, if anything at all. I think the point on Perez, though, is it's not the end of the story, right? It's not like, oh, well done, Checo. You really turned it around over the last couple of races, and therefore you've got your seat. We're going to keep you for 25, 26. Like, let's be real. If Perez comes out after the summer break and stinks it up again, are these conversations going to end, right? Is this a temporary reprieve? Will he actually make it to the end of the season? I don't really know. But clearly over the last couple of rounds, either something's changed or all along they realised that there wasn't really much they could do about this situation. But these are just the results of the season, right? Second, fifth, second, third, 8th in Imola, 4th in Miami, DNF. 8th, 7th, 17th, 7th. And of course it was 8th, but then Russell got disqualified. And this was 7th from 3rd on the qualifying pace and actually 2nd on the grid. So yeah, 2nd to 8th in Spa with a Red Bull is not really what you want to see. But that's how it went. So much criticism on this decision from fans and even from rival teams. I mean, James Vowles says, okay, maybe not so much a rival, but you know what I mean, another team on the grid. He says on the Red Bull situation, even on the Mercedes situation, of course, having just signed Carlos Sainz himself, when you're Red Bull and you've got a Constructors Championship at risk, it's always a hard decision. But I would have signed Carlos alongside Max. I was surprised they didn't. But clearly Red Bull thought otherwise. They decided to pass on Carlos Sainz, and that's why Williams had the opportunity, of course, to eventually get that deal done. Ricciardo, therefore, is going to stay at RB. So they're not going to make any changes, Red Bull. Despite the rumours around this shootout they're trying to do this week between Ricciardo and Lawson, seems like they're not going to do anything about that for now. Ricciardo's going to stay. My feeling is, though, that it's quite likely still that at the end of the season, Ricciardo goes to Red Bull Racing, Perez is done, maybe, finds another seat elsewhere on the grid or goes to IndyCar or something, and then Lawson steps into the RB, because the issue with Lawson is that it's been confirmed now that if they don't give Lawson a drive next year, he's free to go elsewhere, and he'll probably just leave the Red Bull family entirely, to be honest, and seek other opportunities, maybe in Formula 1, maybe elsewhere. So that's the situation right now for Ricciardo, is that he really needs that drive at Red Bull ASAP. Maybe he hadn't done enough to convince Red Bull that he was the man to put in, although, to be honest, that's what I thought they were going to do. Only 137 votes on this one, but still, this was the overall perspective of those that voted in the poll here. No, 81% on making the right call with the driver lineup right. AMUS also go on to say that yes, this test this week between Ricciardo and Lawson for the filming day or whatever, it's gonna test basically comparative data between the two drivers to see who's in the best position going into potentially next season. But even then, if Perez comes out after the summer break and has 4 shocking races in a row, are we saying that it's not guaranteed that Perez gets kicked out of that car still? Intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. The thing is, for Red Bull, though, their car just isn't where they need it to be. Look, Perez started P2, ended 8th. Verstappen started, 7th after the DQ. Verstappen started 11th and ended up finishing 4th, 5th if you don't consider the DQ, whatever you want to say, but the point still stands that he was able to make progress Verstappen through the field and always maximising his results pretty much on these weekends. Okay, the weekend before in Hungary, maybe not maximise the result that weekend, but usually Max is just so consistent at getting the best out of his car, but the car is no longer good enough to work miracles with, as he has done for the last couple of seasons. And maybe what was miraculous was the strength of the car, let's be honest. So this season it's not been the case anymore. Max is still able to do very well, but if Max was on pole, would he have won in Spa? Possibly, but I'm not sure I would go as far to say probably, given the current situation. And Max has now not won a race for the last 4 races, I think, in a row, which is the first time that's happened in basically 4 years. So Red Bull are going to try and bring some upgrades, but it's not clear when they're going to arrive or whether they're even going to work. One pretty remarkable stat to close out the video here. This apparently is the first time this has ever happened in Formula 1 history, but every single driver in the top 10 finishes at the Belgian Grand Prix were previously a race winner. Hamilton, Piastri now, Leclerc, Verstappen, Norris, Sainz, Perez, Alonso, Ocon, of course, famously in Hungary 2021, and then Ricciardo with several occasions as well. The funny thing about this as well, I guess, is that it actually happened twice, because it happened first when Russell officially won, down to Ocon, and then it happened again when Hamilton was declared the winner and Ricciardo was promoted to 10th. So pretty unbelievable stuff. And this as well is incredible to think about, given that when this was posted a few weeks ago now, Verstappen had officially surpassed Hamilton's victory count since 2016 with 61 wins. Hamilton had scored 60 since, I think it was Spain 2016. Of course, it must have been, right? Because that was when Verstappen scored his first win. But the crazy thing is that actually that's now flipped around again. And over the last few weeks, Hamilton's now won 2 of the last 3 Grand Prix and all of a sudden has now overtaken Max. So, when Max took this number off Hamilton, I was like, it looked like Max was going to pull away with victory since 2016. It's quite remarkable, the turnaround over the last few weeks. But very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.